The Zelvari Empire had reigned supreme over the galaxy for thousands of years. Their dominion stretched across countless systems, from the twin star colonies of the Helios Rift to the frozen wastes of Akar Thul. They did not merely conquer, they eradicated. Entire civilizations had been reduced to nothing more than whispers in the cosmic void, remnants of species whose names had been scrubbed from the annals of history. To the Zelvari, war was not about victory or defeat. It was about domination. Veltar, Supreme Admiral of the Sath Zulfal, stood at the observation deck of his dreadnought, gazing into the void beyond. His 6 elongated fingers drummed against the smooth, iridescent control panel. He had seen this before. Another species. Another futile resistance. The humans were no different. Their homeworld, Earth, was primitive compared to the Imperial, strongholds of the Zelvari. Their technology was laughable, their fleets scattered and disorganized, and yet, despite their weakness, they had resisted. Veltar's expression twisted into something akin to amusement. Resistance was nothing new. Every species fought back at first. The Ralthax had done the same before their oceans were turned to sulfur. The Uvathar had believed their planetary shields could withstand the Zelvari's antimatter bombs. The Vordun thought their organic warships could outmaneuver the Imperial fleet. All had fallen. All had burned. The humans would burn too. A translucent holoscreen flickered to life in front of him, bathing his chiseled, metallic grey features in a soft green glow. The shifting glyphs of the Zelvari language displayed a tactical overlay of the enemy fleet. A pitiful collection of warships, scattered in a loose defensive formation. There were no dreadnoughts, no planetary siege-class weapons, nothing that could pose a keen, real-on threat to a force as powerful as the Sath Zul. Veltar exhaled through his elongated nostrils. How predictable. His voice was smooth, layered with the cold arrogance of someone who had orchestrated 1,000 wars and never lost. He glanced at his second in command, Commander Rath Zul, whose luminescent eyes reflected the scrolling battle projections. Rath Zul, ever. The efficient tactician tilted his head. They are using primitive formations, sir. No advanced maneuvers. Their positioning suggests either complete ignorance of naval warfare, he paused, considering, or desperation. "01," Veltar chuckled. Desperation makes them predictable. They are cornered, and they know it. The only reason they are still breathing is because I have not given the order to exterminate them. The bridge of the dreadnought was eerily silent. Only the faint hum of the ship's power cores filled the air, resonating through the metallic bones of the command center. The Zelvari did not celebrate victories before they were won, but in this case, there was no doubt. This was not a battle, it was an execution. Rath Zul examined the holographic data with his sharp analytical gaze. Their fleet numbers are low, sir, but they have been elusive, more so than anticipated. He hesitated, as if the very concept were foreign. We've yet to destroy a single one of their capital ships. Veltar frowned. That was unexpected. The humans lacked sophisticated stealth technology. Their ships relied on conventional shielding and outdated propulsion drives. They had no means near of evading an Imperial blockade. Then, why, Veltar said slowly, are they still here? The question hung in the air, thick with an unspoken tension. Rath Zul tapped a command into the console, enlarging the fleet schematic. Our sensors track their movements, but they are erratic. One moment, they are in range. The next, they vanish. Veltar narrowed his eyes. Malfunctions. No, sir. Our systems are fully operational. Rath Zul's mandibles twitched in discomfort. We simply lose them. A flicker of annoyance crossed the Admiral's expression. Then eliminate them. Deploy the plasma batteries. Scatter their fleet into dust. Rathzul gave a crisp nod. Acknowledged. Weapons primed. Throughout the Sath Azul, energy conduits pulsed with renewed life as the planet cracker cannons activated. Towers of biometal twisted and reshaped, adjusting the massive gun turrets for maximum range. The Zelvari did not believe in inefficient warfare. One devastating blow was all it took to erase a civilization. The targeting systems locked onto the largest of the human warships, a hulking mass of outdated steel and composite plating. One blast. That was all it would take. The calculations finalized. And then it vanished. Not exploded. Not vaporized. Hanheshta. The bridge remained deathly silent. Veltar's eyes darkened. Report. Rathzul's voice was measured, but there was something beneath it. Something that had never been present before. A hesitation. The ship is gone. Veltar's claws tightened against the armrest of his command chair. Gone. Explain. Our sensors. Rathzul paused, verifying the readings. Show nothing. No debris. No energy signatures. It simply ceased to exist. Veltar's skin bristled. That was impossible. No species had technology capable of slipping past Zelvari surveillance. No ship had ever escaped. A lock-on sequence once the Sath-Zul had targeted it. Then another blip disappeared, and another. One by one, the human warships blinked out of existence. Veltar stood. This is a trick, some kind of primitive countermeasure. But he knew deep down that it wasn't. The Zelvari had fought hundreds of wars. They had seen everything. Yet this was something else. His second-in-command exhaled. Sir, I think... His next words were slow, deliberate. I think they are still here. Veltar's jaw clenched. You mean to tell me, he said, voice dangerously low, that an entire fleet of human warships is right in front of us, and we cannot see them? Rathazul swallowed. Yes, Admiral. A cold sensation coiled in Veltar's gut. The temperature in the command bridge had not changed, but he suddenly felt as if the room had grown colder. Then the hollow screen flickered. A distortion, a presence. Veltar's elongated pupils constricted as an image resolved itself. A human, not in person. No, a transmission. But the very fact that it had appeared on the Dreadnought's secure frequency was impossible. The figure on the screen was calm, composed, entirely unafraid. His uniform was sleek, dark, unmarked by insignias, but his eyes held in knowledge. Knowledge that Veltar did not possess. The human leaned slightly forward, offering a polite nod. Admiral Veltar, he said, voice eerily measured. I assume you were expecting something simpler. Veltar's claws twitched. His voice was quiet but sharp as a blade. Who are you? The human tilted his head, offering the smallest of smiles. Captain Elias Grayson, he said, US Revenant. Veltar's breath caught in his throat. That name was a myth. And suddenly, for the first time in his long, war-filled life, Veltar did not feel like a predator. He felt like prey. The Al-Sath-Zul floated in the void, a monolithic war machine poised to strike. Its massive plasma batteries hummed with energy, preparing to unleash devastation upon the human fleet. Veltar's confidence remained unwavering. The humans were weak. They had always been weak, but something was wrong. The targeting systems locked onto the largest of the human warships, a bulky, outdated carrier that should have been an easy kill. The moment the calculations finalized, the order was given. Fire. The dreadnought's primary plasma cannons roared to life, launching, a searing wave of energy. Through the darkness, the blast tore across the void, illuminating the battlefield like a second sun. There was no escape. The human ship was in direct range, but then it vanished. Not vaporized, not obliterated, gone. Veltar's elongated pupils contracted, his claws tensed against the control panel. Report! The bridge was silent. Officers frantically tapped on holographic interfaces, scanning for any sign of debris, radiation, anything that could explain what had just happened. Rathzul hesitated before speaking. His voice, normally sharp and measured, carried an unfamiliar edge. There is nothing. No wreckage, no energy signature. The ship simply ceased to exist. Veltar's jaws tightened. That was impossible. The Zelvari had fought dozens of species across the centuries. Races with cloaking devices, ships with warp-jump technology, civilizations that bent the very laws of physics. But nothing had ever escaped a direct plasma barrage from the Sath-Zul. Yet the human warship had disappeared without a trace. The silence on the bridge deepened as another blip on the holographic projection flickered and vanished. Then another. One by one, the human warships blinked out of existence. Veltar's claws scraped against the cold metal of his armrest. What is this? Rathzul exhaled sharply, eyes darting across the interface. Our sensors. They still detect mass fluctuations where the ships were. It's almost as if... He paused, struggling to find the words. As if they are still there. Veltar turned his gaze toward him, his expression dark. You are telling me that an entire fleet of human warships is right in front of us? And we cannot see them? Rathzul swallowed. Yes, Admiral. Veltar leaned back in his seat, exhaling through his elongated nostrils. A creeping sensation coiled in his chest, something he had not felt in centuries. A cold, quiet realization. The humans were not fleeing. They were hunting. He's Sath-Zul. Drifted in the silence of space. The crew held their breath. One by one, the human warships vanished back before their eyes. There were no explosions, no signs of destruction, just the eerie, undeniable fact that the enemy fleet was slipping out of existence. Veltar clenched his claws against the armrest of his command throne, his elongated pupils narrowing. This wasn't possible. No species, no technology in the known galaxy could simply erase ships from reality, and yet it was happening. The main holoscreen flickered, distorting for a fraction of a second before stabilizing. At first, it seemed like a simple interference, perhaps a residual anomaly from the plasma cannon's discharge. But then, a face appeared. A human, not in person. A transmission. But the very fact that it had appeared on the dreadnought's secure frequency was an impossibility in itself. The figure was calm, composed, and entirely unafraid. He wore a sleek, black uniform unmarked by insignias or identification, but his eyes held something that made Veltar's throat tighten. Understanding. The human leaned slightly forward, offering a polite nod. Admiral Veltar, he said, his voice smooth and controlled. I assume you were expecting something simpler. Veltar did not move. The bridge crew remained frozen. Every Zelvari locked onto the human's image, their bioluminescent eyes flickering with something they had never felt before. Unease. Veltar's voice was quiet, but sharp as a blade. Who are you? The human tilted his head ever so slightly, the hint of a smile playing at the edges of his mouth. Captain Elias Grayson, he replied. US's Revenant. The name crashed through the silence like an impact. Veltar's mind raced. That name was a myth. A ghost whispered among fringe worlds and covert intelligence reports, a warship that had never been confirmed, never been seen, never been proven to exist. A shadow that haunted the spaces between systems, striking where no fleet should have been able to. Veltar exhaled slowly. His voice was measured, but behind it was something he refused to name. A name means nothing, he said. A myth is not a weapon. Grayson's smile did not waver. That depends, he said. Do you feel safe? A flicker of irritation flashed through Veltar's mind. Your ships are gone, he said. We will find you, and when we do, we will erase you, Grayson chuckled. It was not mocking, nor cruel. It was worse. It was amused. You still don't understand, he said, his voice almost pitying. You're trying to fight something you can't even see. Veltar's claws tensed. Enough. He turned to Rathzul. Locate their source. Trace the signal. Now. Rathzul's fingers danced over the control panel. Seconds passed. Then his hands froze. His mandibles twitched in confusion. Sir, he swallowed. The transmission is coming from inside the Sathzul. Veltar's mind recoiled. That was impossible. Then, the lights flickered. The ship shuddered. And in the deepest part of his being, Veltar realized something he could not deny. The USS Revenant was already here. The Zathzol trembled. It was subtle at first, an almost imperceptible vibration through the reinforced biometal of the dreadnought's hull. But then, the tremor deepened, rippling through the structure like an invisible force pressing against the ship's core. Veltar's claws curled against the armrest of his command throne. His bioluminescent eyes flickered, scanning the control panels. No alarms, no impact warnings, nothing to suggest an external attack. And yet, something was happening. He turned sharply to Rathzul. Status report. The second in command was already hunched over the hollow interface, his elongated fingers flying across the translucent console. His mandibles clicked, a subconscious reaction of unease. Unknown interference detected. It's spreading through our internal systems. Veltar's gaze darkened. What kind of interference? Rathzul exhaled sharply. Something is overriding our command protocols. His voice was strained, as if forcing himself to believe his own words. I am detecting spatial distortions inside the ship. The bridge fell into an eerie silence. Officers exchanged uneasy glances. Zelvari ships did not experience anomalies. They were the pinnacle of technological perfection. Nothing could interfere with their systems. Nothing should be inside the Sathzul. Then the lights flickered again. A whisper of static curled through the air like a distant breath. The holoscreens glitched, rippling with distortion. Glyphs rearranged themselves, their once perfect symmetry collapsing into gibberish before stabilizing again. Veltar's mind raced. This was no ordinary infiltration. No known technology could phase through the reinforced hull of a Zelvari dreadnought. No enemy had ever breached the inside of his ship without setting off a single alarm. His claws flexed. Locate the source of the anomaly, now. Rathzul was already on it, his fingers working frantically. He stopped, stared. His mandibles parted slightly. "Sir, it's moving." Veltar's pupils constricted. "What is moving?" Rathazul's voice dropped to a whisper. "The distortion." The holoscreens flickered, adjusting to his inputs. A shipwide scan illuminated the dreadnought's internal structure. What should have been a flawless schematic was instead marred by something else. A presence that should not be there. A mass of shifting, shadowed energy flowing through the corridors like liquid void. Veltar's chest tightened. "Security teams report." Static. The communication channels were dead. Then, a voice. Not over the speakers, not through their translators. It spoke directly into their minds. "You've relied on your technology for so long, Admiral. You don't know what it's like to be truly blind." Veltar's breath hitched. Grayson. The voice was inside. The ship. A cold dread settled over the bridge. The officers sat frozen, their bioluminescent eyes wide, staring at Veltar, waiting for an order, waiting for something that could explain this impossibility. But there was no explanation. Veltar forced his voice into steel. "Where are you?" Grayson's voice remained smooth. "Everywhere, nowhere." The lights dimmed completely. The Sath-Zul was no longer under Xelvari control. For the first time in centuries, a Xelvari dreadnought, the Empire's ultimate weapon, had become something else. A Chartan prison. And the humans had the key, that the Sath-Zul was silent. For the first time in its history, the dreadnought, the pride of the Xelvari fleet, the destroyer of worlds, the executioner of empires, stood still, powerless. Its immense reactors hummed with restrained energy, but no command was given. No order was executed. It no longer belonged to the Xelvari. Veltar sat rigidly in his command throne, his mind calculating and recalculating every possible scenario. This wasn't a battle. It had never been a battle. The humans hadn't come to fight. They had come to take. A faint sound echoed through the bridge. A single rhythmic noise. Footsteps. They were light, deliberate, tapping against the biometallic floors of the Sath-Zul, as if they belonged there. Veltar's breath slowed. His entire crew was present. No Xelvari was moving. Then, out of the darkness, a figure stepped forward. Captain Elias Grayson. The human strolled onto the bridge as if he were walking through his own ship. His black uniform remained unmarked, pristine. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture relaxed. The dim emergency lighting cast his silhouette across the walls, making him appear like a shadow, given form. Not a single alarm had been triggered, not a single door had opened. He had simply arrived. Veltar's mandibles tightened. His voice, though low, carried unspoken rage. "How did you get here?" Grayson's gaze was steady, unwavering. He did not gloat. He did not threaten. Instead, he simply tilted his head. "You still think this is your ship, don't you?" Veltar's claws gripped the armrests. He would not be intimidated by a primitive. "You believe this changes anything?" "Ah," he growled. "You are one ship. We are an empire. The moment you leave, the fleet will descend upon you like a swarm of Arathian wraiths. We will burn your world to ash. We will erase your name from the stars." Grayson exhaled softly. It was not a sigh of fear, nor one of arrogance. It was disappointment. "You still don't understand what's happening." He turned slightly, walking toward one of the inactive consoles. With a single touch, the holographic displays flared to life. Veltar's eyes flicked toward the screen. His fleet, his mighty fleet, was still out there. Hundreds of Zelvari warships orbiting, waiting, their weapons primed for destruction. Grayson tapped the console again. A single command, the entire Zelvari fleet vanished. Not destroyed, not attacked. Gone. Veltar's breath hitched. Grayson watched him carefully. His voice, when he spoke again, was patient, but absolute. We are not here to win a war. We are here to show you that war is already over. Veltar's throat constricted. He refused we to believe it. His empire was the pinnacle of power, the ultimate force in the galaxy. It had stood for millennia. It could not fall. Grayson took a slow step closer. Orancy, you believed that because you had the largest fleet, the strongest weapons, the greatest technology, that nothing could threaten you. Another step. You never considered that we wouldn't fight by your rules. Veltar's hands trembled. His mind screamed for a counter, for a way to reassert control. But there was nothing left to control. Grayson stopped just before him, looking down at the once proud admiral of the Zelvari fleet. And then, in a quiet voice, he delivered the final truth. We didn't come to fight you, Admiral. We came to make sure you never fight again. The Sath-Zul, the mightiest warship of the Zelvari Empire, blinked out of existence.